the most dominant force in modern hockey, a player so transcendent that entire franchises rebuild their strategies around the mere possibility of facing him, might actually be available, not through some blockbuster trade or scandal, but through the simple expiration of a contract. We're talking about Connor McDavid, and the tremors of possibility are already shaking the NHL to its core. The unthinkable becomes inevitable. For years, hockey fans have operated under one fundamental assumption: Connor McDavid is untouchable. He's Edmonton's golden boy, their franchise savior, the player around whom an entire city's hockey dreams revolve. But here's the reality check that's keeping general managers across the league awake at night. McDavid's 8-year, $100 million contract expires after next season, and suddenly, the impossible has entered the realm of possibility. The Edmonton Oilers have until July 1st to lock down their generational superstar with an extension. But what if McDavid decides to test the waters? What if, for the first time in his career, hockey's greatest player decides to see what else is out there? Enter the Toronto Maple Leafs, a franchise so desperate for championship glory that they're being whispered about as the primary threat to steal McDavid away from Alberta. This isn't some fantasy scenario cooked up by Toronto media. This is legitimate insider intelligence suggesting that Canada's biggest market has set their sights on Canada's biggest star. The anatomy of desperation. Let's talk about Toronto's situation with brutal honesty. This is a franchise that's been haunted by failure for over 5 decades. Since 1967, they watched 30 other teams celebrate Stanley Cup victories, while they become the poster child for playoff disappointment. Every spring brings the same crushing familiarity. High hopes followed by devastating elimination. The pressure in Toronto isn't just about winning anymore. It's about survival. Management, players, coaches, everyone understands that the status quo isn't sustainable. The fan base has moved beyond frustration into something approaching despair, and ownership knows that dramatic action is the only path forward. NHL insider Adam Gretz perfectly captured the magnitude of this potential pursuit. How often would Canada's biggest hockey market have a chance to acquire Canada's best player, especially one that was born in the Greater Toronto Area? That last detail isn't just trivia. It's the emotional hook that could make this entire scenario reality. McDavid isn't just any superstar. He's a hometown kid who grew up in Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto. The narrative practically writes itself. The prodigal son returning home to deliver the championship that's eluded his childhood team for generations. The strategic earthquake here is where the story becomes absolutely fascinating from a hockey operations standpoint. Toronto already employs their own generational center in Auston Matthews, which creates one of the most luxurious problems in professional sports. How do you maximize 2 elite centers on the same roster? The possibilities are staggering. Gretz outlined 2 scenarios that would fundamentally reshape how we think about team construction in the NHL. The first option: create the most dominant 1-2 punch down the middle in hockey history. Imagine opposing teams trying to match lines against both McDavid and Matthews. It would be tactical warfare at its finest. The second option is even more audacious. Trade Matthews for a massive package of assets and replace him with McDavid at the top of the organizational hierarchy. It sounds insane, but consider the logic. If you can upgrade from one generational talent to an even greater one, while also acquiring additional pieces, don't you have to explore that possibility? The salary cap implications alone would require financial wizardry. McDavid's next contract will likely push into the $15 million annual range, meaning Toronto would need to perform roster surgery that would make previous salary cap maneuvers look elementary. Edmonton's ticking time bomb while Toronto fantasizes about their McDavid acquisition. Edmonton faces a nightmare scenario that franchise executives probably don't want to contemplate. They built their entire organizational identity around McDavid, and the thought of losing him represents an existential threat to their championship aspirations. Consider McDavid's recent playoff history with Edmonton. Back-to-back Stanley Cup final appearances that ended in heartbreaking defeats. The first loss seemed to galvanize him and the organization. They were determined to get back and finish the job. But after the second finals defeat, something in McDavid's demeanor seemed different. When asked about returning to the finals, his response was telling, "I think so. We still have a lot of confidence and belief." Notice the uncertainty in those words. This wasn't the confident declaration we heard after their first finals loss, but rather a more measured acknowledgement of reality. McDavid is now 0-2 in Stanley Cup finals. For a player of his caliber, those failures sting in ways that regular season achievements can never heal. At some point, even the most loyal superstars start questioning whether their current situation can deliver the ultimate prize. The numbers don't lie. The betting markets are already reflecting the possibility of McDavid's departure, and the numbers should concern Oilers fans. While BetCanada.com gives Edmonton a 67.7% chance of re-signing their superstar, that leaves a very real 32.3% probability that he walks away. In the context of superstar free agency, those odds represent a genuine threat. Toronto leads all outside suitors with 7.4% odds, a figure that might seem small, but actually represents them as the clear favorite among 29 other potential destinations. These aren't just random numbers generated by odds makers looking for betting action. They reflect legitimate industry intelligence about McDavid's mindset, Toronto's financial capabilities, and the broader dynamics at play in this potential transaction. The domino effect revolution if McDavid actually reaches free agency. We're not discussing a simple player movement. We're talking about a seismic shift that could trigger the most chaotic offseason in NHL history. Teams would gut their rosters to create salary cap space. Star players would demand trades to join McDavid's new organization. The entire competitive landscape would be redrawn overnight. Toronto acquiring McDavid wouldn't just be a hockey transaction. It would be a cultural phenomenon that would dominate Canadian sports media for years. The pressure, expectations, and scrutiny would reach levels that even hockey-mad Toronto has never experienced. The championship equation at 27 years old, McDavid has already accomplished nearly everything possible in individual hockey excellence. He's a 3-time MVP, 5-time scoring champion, and a consensus choice as the game's premier talent. But championships are what separate good players from legends, and that Stanley Cup ring remains frustratingly elusive. The brutal reality is this: McDavid has given Edmonton everything, and they haven't been able to deliver him the one thing he wants most. How long does a generational talent wait for organizational success before exploring other options? Toronto represents something Edmonton cannot: a clean slate, unlimited resources, and a fan base so hungry for championship success that they would literally worship McDavid as a sporting deity. The ultimate question as we stand on the precipice of what could be the most significant free agency decision in modern hockey history. One question dominates every conversation. Will Edmonton find a way to finally deliver McDavid his championship? Or will Toronto pull off the heist of the century? The clock is ticking, the pressure is mounting, and the hockey world is holding its collective breath. McDavid's next contract won't just determine where he plays. It could fundamentally alter the balance of power in the NHL. This story has all the elements of a sports epic: hometown loyalties, championship dreams, organizational desperation, and the career-defining decision of hockey's greatest player. We're witnessing history in the making, and the resolution will send shockwaves through the sport for generations. What's your prediction on this blockbuster scenario? Will McDavid stay loyal to Edmonton, or could Toronto's hometown appeal actually lure him away? Share your boldest predictions in the comments, and hit that like button if you're as captivated by this unfolding drama as every other hockey fanatic on the planet.